thank you to my son, Zev. I hope that gets us off to a nice start. So one of the main reasons for us doing this, in addition to bringing you music, trying to keep in contact with you, our patrons, is also for you to have a chance to get to know some of our wonderful players. Last week, we had Stephen Franklin, our trumpeter, and today we have one of our wonderful cellists. Please welcome to our webinar, Jonathan Brin. Jonathan, are you there?
I am here. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm doing just great. So where are you broadcasting from?
From the living room here in Saratoga Springs.
So not too far afield from Lake Placid.
Really not. No, I mean our shot door to door usually is about an hour and 45 minutes, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to have you here today. And let's start out just by how has everything been with you and your family during this crisis? How are things in Saratoga and with your family?
Yeah, I mean it's as with everyone, it's a lot of adjustment, a lot of just kind of getting used to new situations with our daughter. Annabelle, she was mainly through second grade, going in school. She continued through the rest of the year, remote learning as everyone else did. Our son, Elliot, being in preschool, it was more just kind of at-home learning stuff we did with him. But obviously, neither of them had the traditional school experience with everything shut down. But it was just a matter of finding them other things to do at-home activities, lots of outdoor things like that. And then our new addition, Oliver, is every day is a new adventure, learning new things, crawling now, kind of standing himself up on furniture and things like that. So
how old is he now, Jonathan? How old is Oliver?
Oliver is 10 months.
Oh my goodness. So quite a year you've had. I mean, between a newborn and then this pandemic.
Yes, no, exactly.
And so do you want to start out with some music? Would you have music to play for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I've got a couple pieces picked out here today. As a cellist, as most likely natural, we have an affinity for the solo Bach suite, so I picked a couple movements from some of the solo Bach suites, and also at the end a more modern solo work, but still influenced by Bach. So the first
fantastic.
The first piece I'll play is the Saraband from the fourth suite in the key of E flat.
Fantastic. Look forward to it. was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I mean, Bach always astonishes me. Listening to you play that, it's kind of, in a sense, it's like food for the soul, and particularly these cello suites. I think there's something. Maybe it's about the range of the instrument that just feels like it's directly speaking to the human soul. Like, how do you think about these pieces when you're preparing them and when you're playing them?
I think very similarly in a way. I mean, it's just there's, I mean, the beauty of them and also kind of the challenge of them is it's just you. I mean, there's nothing there supporting it. Actually, what's kind of interesting about these pieces, um, before in the early 20th century, when the great cellist Pablo Casals kind of, in a way, almost rediscovered them. The story was he found them in a dusty stack of music in a music store, just kind of in the back, where they'd been just kind of, Bach really wasn't played all that much, and if it was, people felt like, oh, it needs an accompaniment. So piano people would write piano accompaniments to these pieces. Today, it feels like, what are you doing? It's not necessary. But back then, they were almost viewed more as etudes. And it was Casals initially that said these are such amazing pieces. They exist on their own. They don't need any help. But I mean, that's the thing about it. There's kind of a feeling, an exposed feeling of you've got no support there. But also, there's something just amazing about the feeling that all this music is just there, just a single voice instrument. And I mean, in a lot of these suites, what he does that's amazing is I can hear his training as a keyboard player and composer, that he doesn't want to be held back by the fact that the cello, or also with the violin sonatas and partitas, we can't play 5 or 6 or 7 notes at the same time. We can't use all of our fingers and our feet on pedals, but he can create that illusion by the way he voices, by the way he kind of combines chords and almost tricks our ears into thinking that we're hearing more notes at a time than we actually are. And that's the amazing, one of the many, many amazing things for me as Bach as a composer, is he could take these single voice instruments and create these huge sounding chords that sometimes we hear more than we actually are.
It is remarkable to think about, especially given that Bach is known in a large way as a contrapuntist, someone who wrote fugues, someone who wrote, you know, toccatas and fugues, preludes and fugues. But you also have to remember that this is the guy that wrote, you know, Air on a G string, one of the most beautiful melodies in the repertoire. And I think that these cello suites, I mean, what a gift to the cello. Can you imagine a world as a cellist without these suites?
Right, right. And in a way, before Casals, that's the way it was. Because I mean, there were cellists out there, but nobody really played them nearly as much as they should be. And even the violin sonatas and partitas weren't played until Casals brought the suites to the forefront to the world. And it's just, I mean, it was kind of, in a way, a smaller second Bach revival after what Mendelssohn had done. He's like, look at these amazing pieces. They need to be heard, and they're concert pieces. They're not studies or etudes.
That's right. And yet they cover such a wealth of technique that you can learn so much from playing them.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I always listen to with Bach in general. He's a composer. It's just so timeless. I mean, you never hear a note of Bach that sounds antiquated or dated, or it's been surpassed. It's nothing. He still sounds as fresh and as innovative today as when it was written.
300 years later, it's hard to believe. So let's go back to Lake Placid for a moment. Sure. How long have you been playing in the Lake Placid Sinfonietta?
My first summer there was in 2008. So,
oh, wow. So it's been a while already.
Yes. It was, to think back, this is the first summer in 13 years that I'm not up there playing. It's so hard. I mean, there's so many things about it, both musically and personally and socially, to be missed, and just to not have that beginning of July. It's like our car almost tried to start driving north without us even in it. We're so used to it.
And how did it come about? How did you hear about the Lake Placid Sinfonietta?
My first kind of foray into connecting with the organization was through our principal cellist, Ann Alton, who at the time when Amanda and I, before our kids, had moved to the area in 2007, and right here in our town in Saratoga is Skidmore College, where Ann was teaching at the time, and she had in the area private students. One of her private cello students was a member of a chamber group that I was coaching through one of the local youth orchestras. So that was kind of our first way that we connected up. We had a kind of a student in common, and mine as a chamber student, hers as a private student. And she contacted me a bit before the summer of 2008 because they were looking for a second cello at the time, and I was able to play a portion of that summer. And so I came up that first time, and that summer was just with me. And then the following summer, as because I had mentioned, if there was a need for violin, my wife plays violin, and fortunately, the next summer there was an opening where a violinist was needed, and Amanda was able to start playing in 2009, and then we've been fortunate enough to do it ever since.
You know, I always refer to situations like that as the heavens open up and the heavenly choir sings. The idea of spouses actually being able to get work together in the same orchestra.
Yes.
Is just such a wonderful thing. And so that must, of course, make the experience fantastic for you.
Yes.
And,
for sure.
and how does it work now that you have a family as well? I mean, that since 2008, you now have 3 kids.
Yes.
Do they like coming up in the summers as well?
They love it. I mean, there's the friends that they have up there, the babysitters they get to know up there. I mean, all the patrons and everyone in the organization, the places they like to get to go. Even Elliot, he's like, oh, remember that time we went picking blueberries behind the art center and things like that. And then there's, of course, we need to make our frequent trips out to Donnelly's and everything else. So yeah, for sure. I mean, that's for them right from the beginning. I mean, Annabelle's first summer, she was 6 weeks when we got there, and
Wow.
Elliot was not quite a month when we first got there. So for the 2 of them, there was like they've known that area almost as long as they've known the area down here.
Well, I can certainly say that I got to know them just a little bit during the 2 weeks that I was with you all last summer and fell in love with those kids. I mean, they're terrific children.
Thank you.
And very comfortable around adults. So I'm sure that the people who have been to the concerts have seen them. They may not have known that they went with you guys, but it's the 2 remarkably cute kids that are at the concerts.
You've seen them kind of, especially running through the hill after the concerts on Wednesday nights. Some of them would have been ours.
So you have a very full performing life. I mean, you actually cover a lot of bases in what you do. You play in the Sinfonietta in the summer.
Yes.
You play in a string quartet with Amanda during the year, correct?
Yes.
And you also teach a rather large studio of players, as well as whatever solo work you're doing and other freelance work. How do you balance all of this and keep it all clear in your mind and create this musical life out of so many different disparate things?
No, it's a good question. Well, part of it is now, especially with having our kids and having to coordinate childcare in addition to all of our playing, regular meetings we find really makes a difference. As much as we didn't realize that we have to sit down with our calendars and say, okay, I have this weekend, I have that weekend. Let's make sure that we're not kind of overlapping, because I mean, usually we don't. We did have one instance where I was like, oh, wait, I'm playing the first week of March. She's like, oh, I'm playing the first week of March. Where are you playing? I'm like, oh, we're playing in the same place. So we're then a scramble to find someone to watch the kids, because now when we both play and watch the kids, we try to stagger performances during the year. But it's just a matter of just making sure we're always touching base and knowing who has what when, and then just kind of passing back and forth and that sort of thing.
And did the string quartet come about after you married Amanda, or did you meet playing chamber music?
We did actually, yeah. I mean, the quartet really kind of had its first beginnings our freshman year, because we both went to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, and one of the many great things of the experiences we had at that school is for all of the violin, viola, and cello players, freshman class, we would take a class called Freshman Quartet Seminar. And at Eastman, the Ying Quartet is the quartet in residence there. And so what they would do is they would take the violins, violas, and cellos, and they'd split the year kind of into 4 sections. So basically you cut each semester in half. And for each half a semester, you would play with 3 different players, and you would work on a chamber piece of a different style. So I think we started the year with a Mozart or a Haydn, and then we played a 20th century work, then we played a romantic work, and then we played a Beethoven quartet. So by the end of the year, you had a chance pretty much to play with all of the strings, other than the bassists who were doing something else, and we had a chance to work with everyone. And at the end of that freshman year, we had those of us, Amanda and I, and then two others who we played with, not all four in that formation, but at least in pairs, decided we wanted to play in a string quartet together. So starting from the end of freshman year, so this would have been spring of '99, then that's kind of when the quartet actually came together as an actual quartet. And so from then we've been playing with different formation setups other than Amanda and I through the years, but since '99 we've been in the quartet together.
That's really cool, and it's really nice. So, are there tensions that come about because when you're working together so intensely, and when you're married to each other, is it always bliss, or does it cause sometimes strangeness?
I mean, I think it's, at least from our experiences, I would say there's always going to be kind of like creative differences within a rehearsal situation, but I think for the most part, if we're in that situation, we kind of are looking at things more as we're two players in the quartet, as opposed to our relationships outside of that. So I mean, obviously, not everyone's going to see eye to eye on everything, but I think it's always kind of like four individuals in the situation is how we're able to balance it out.
Well, I have to say, I think you're extremely lucky to be able to do that, to be able to spend so much of your lives outside of family, in the work setting together. That's really quite a wonderful thing to pull off. One last question before I ask you to play another piece. You play in the Sinfonietta in the summer. Now that's a very unique kind of orchestra with just about 20 players playing together.
Yes.
Do you play in larger orchestras as well during the course of the year?
Yes, yeah. So I'm the principal cellist of the Glens Falls Symphony, which is just a little bit north of here in north of Saratoga. I'm a member of the Vermont Symphony. Primarily, we play over in Burlington, but they play in some other parts of the state. As recently, I've been playing as a sub a good amount with the Rochester Philharmonic, so kind of shooting west in the state some as well. So definitely, I mean, playing in larger size groups orchestra-wise, in addition to the setting of the Sinfonietta.
And is the experience profoundly different playing in a large orchestra as playing in a smaller one? And how would you describe that difference?
It's interesting, I think, because having come to the Sinfonietta from already having played in some larger groups and already having played in a quartet, what it feels like it's kind of like a hybrid of those two situations. I mean, it's more orchestral in a way than a quartet, but it's definitely more chamber music oriented in a way than a full-size symphony. I mean, you've got the kind of combine the strengths of the two situations, so it's an interesting feeling, and also sometimes it's also interesting to play a work with the Sinfonietta that I might have played in a larger group, that same work that previous season, to kind of just hear the piece in a different way, hear the voices kind of connecting in a different way as well. So it's fun to play in a group of that particular size instrumentation, because you don't get to do it as often unless you always play in a chamber orchestra, which I'll do through the year. So it's always a refreshing kind of a musical setting to experience.
Yeah, I felt the same way, that it was kind of a neat, quasi-chamber, quasi-orchestra. But what I love is that it's impossible to play with such a small ensemble without constant interaction among the players.
Yeah.
And that, I think, creates a very exciting dynamic for not just for the music making, but for the audience as well, seeing that kind of interaction.
Yes, definitely.
So I understand you have another piece by Bach to play for us? Yes.
So I've got not to be a broken record, but a saraband from the Sixth Suite. I kind of picked these two particular ones from Bach. It's perhaps, as getting into my old age, I find I still enjoy the pieces of bombast and lots of excitement, but also really kind of gravitating toward these somewhat more introspective movements. And with the sarabands in particular with Bach, what I started to appreciate more with my undergrad was just remembering that they are, just as the other forms of the movements in the Bach suites, they are still dances. And I think sometimes with the slow movements, it's easy to kind of almost have like a rhapsodic feel to them and forget, whereas though that they're slower than the minuet or a courante or an allemande, they still have this overlying structure to them. And one memory I have from my undergrad is we would play in studio class, or over 20 people usually on our studio, and if one of us was playing a movement of Bach, our teacher would have the whole rest of our studio stand around them and dance in the rhythm of the tempo of whatever Bach movement we were playing. So it kind of externally really emphasized the rhythmic structure and kind of the idea where perhaps he didn't write these to be danced to, but he really wanted them to have a character of being a dance. Even the slow movements having that structure in there and not just kind of these long strings of notes.
Fantastic. Let's hear it. Thank you. So it strikes me that's actually a very different approach to cello playing than the previous saraband. It sounds like there are far more voices. a lot more filling in complete chords rather than just a bass line. Is there a different approach to playing a piece like that?
There is, and actually, interesting your comment about being more voices. In a way, one reason for that is it technically wasn't written for the cello in the fact that the cello has four strings. The sixth suite was actually written for, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe the instrument was called a viola pomposo, which had an additional E string above the A string. So, and
Wow.
Bach was he was actually very creative compositionally with a number of the suites. The fifth suite in C minor, um, to really play it traditionally, it's what we would call scordatura, which is you detune one of the strings. In the fifth suite, you would tune the A string, the high string, down to a G. And because it's being written in C minor, tuning the top string down to a G allows you to realize chords in more voices. Now, cellists don't always perform it that way. One technical issue you can run into is if you're going to play that piece on a recital and then play another piece, if you're retuning the cello, it's not going to hold its tune all that well. But for people that can do that, or if they maybe even have a secondary instrument to play a concert on, it's an amazing sound to hear the cello tuned differently, and you're hearing one or two more notes per chord than you do in traditional tuning. With this saraband, really what it is, it's not a change of the notes themselves, it's just certain higher pitches, whereas if you only have the four strings to play the top note, you have to shift up to a higher part of the string, where the closer you get to the bridge, the higher the tension gets in the string, and it changes the quality of the sound. So I can play a note high up on the A string. I can still play the pitch that he wanted on that higher E string, but it might not ring quite as naturally because the string is at a higher tension. So that's always the kind of the debate too. Some cellists, when they record it, will record it on a traditional four-string cello. Others will record it on that instrument with the E string, and you can kind of hear the instrument just kind of breathing differently, kind of behaving differently, because you're playing the same pitch but in a more relaxed part of the instrument's register.
Well, that is absolutely fascinating, and it makes me think that there must be other pieces in the repertoire, especially ones that are written up in the stratosphere, that might benefit, make it a little bit easier to play on the viola pomposa.
Right. And there's like, I mean, a lot of times, sometimes you'll see more bass players with an additional string on their instruments, or there's solo bass tuning versus orchestral bass tuning that sometimes will help with some of those pieces. But this suite in particular, just the way it's written, it's that's one of the challenges it presents, is that you're not, if you're playing on a four-string cello, you're not playing it on the instrument that it was originally intended. So you're doing as well as you can on it, but you're always kind of like fighting an uphill battle for some of the colors that Bach would have had in his ear when he wrote the piece.
That's fascinating, and that's actually something that I had never heard before. So thank you very much for sharing that. I was thinking, I certainly know some pompous violists, right, but I've never seen a viola pomposa.
Right.
Talking completely non-musically, when you're up in Lake Placid, what are the things that you like to do up there when you're not making music with the Sinfonietta?
Yes, I mean, I think one thing from the beginning that we always had found, being a little bit of foodies, is there's so many great places to get to have food to eat. I'd already mentioned our affinity for Donnelly's, getting to go out there, a number of great places to have some food, so many great sights to see, so many great people to get to run into, exercising, hiking, that sort of thing has been a lot of fun. We've been fortunate to have been given from a former member a hiking backpack for our little ones, so when they're not able to hike themselves, I've carried them up on my back, and so they get to experience that. The miniature golf courses there are always a popular thing for us as kids. I think what else we do, just kind of seeing the sights, the fresh air, just all of that sort of thing is always so nice, and to kind of get to a slightly quieter place is always enjoyable.
It is a very unique and very beautiful place with lots of cool things to do. So you have another piece to play. This one is American, but
Yes.
but it's related to the Bach that you just played, isn't it?
It is. It is. So one of the, I think one of the great gifts that the Bach suites gave us, and also um, Pablo Casal's kind of rediscovering them for the world, was kind of demonstrating the capabilities of the cello as a solo instrument, and through especially through the 20th century, there between Bach and really the next probably truly great solo cello work would have been the solo sonata by Zoltán Kodály, which another example of a scordatura sort of a piece, whereas with the Bach you would tune the top string down a whole step. With this Kodály solo sonata, you tune the bottom two strings down a half step, allowing the cello to get down to play in the key of B and catching the low B below the C string. Max Reger wrote a piece that was really trying to emulate Bach, but in a way it wasn't as kind of progressive as the Kodály was. He was trying to, I think, show reverence to Bach and to the Bach suites, but didn't push forward the capabilities all that much. Kodály was the first person to really do that, and even Bela Bartok, his countryman, said could really kind of like disregarded the Reger and said Kodály was the first person to really write a significant solo cello work since Bach. And after the Kodály, many other composers, Benjamin Britten being an example, wrote three really great solo suites dedicated to Rostropovich. And from what I've read, I think his initial intent was try to write 6 suites to really mirror that. He only ended up getting through the 3, but he wrote 3 really great solo cello suites. Hindemith wrote some really great solo cello music. Georgi Ligeti wrote a great solo cello sonata. And then John Harbison, the composer I'm going to play these 2 movements from, he did, I think, in a way, kind of what Reger did to be more emulating of Bach, but kind of gave it his own voice a little bit more. So he took the some of the forms from the Bach suites. So, for example, I'm going to play the 3rd and the 4th movement, which is a saraband, so very similar in style to especially the saraband I just played, in that they're in what we call a 3 meter, 3 beats in a measure, and the emphasis is really kind of placed on the second beat. With the saraband of the 6th suite that I just played, you kind of had a 1, 2, 3, kind of lean on that second beat. The very beginning of the Harbison, I'll just play the first measure. You kind of start off on 1, and you lean into that second note, so it kind of emulates that. And then the last movement, the giga or jig, or loosely translated, similar to a jig, a much more kind of like higher energy movement. All of the Bach suites always ended with a jig, and this one ends with a jig as well, kind of in a lot of momentum, a feeling of like a lot of triplets, where a lot of the Bach jigs have the same sort of thing, so a kind of high energy triplet oriented rhythm. So this is the saraband and the giga from John Harbison's solo cello suite.
Wow, bravo. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So is this a piece that you've known for a long time?
It somewhat is, yes. So I discovered it actually, which happens once in a while, through looking for a recording of another piece.
Mm-hmm.
So really, when I was just getting into college, I hadn't known all that much of Georgi Ligody's music. I actually discovered it through my roommate, who at the time was a freshman flute player, and his woodwind quintet played the Six Bagatelles by Ligody. I'm like, this is a really great piece. I wonder if he wrote anything for cello. And so I searched it out. Oh, he wrote a solo cello sonata, and the recording I happened upon was the first recording of it, which was by the great cellist Matt Heimovitz. And so the original recording itself had gone out of print, but he had created a kind of like a compilation recording. He made a recording of a lot of different of these great 20th century solo cello works. And so when I found it and found the Ligody on that kind of compilation set, I also happened across this Harbison, and there was a point where for an audition I needed a kind of what we would call like a postmodern cello work, which I didn't have a lot in my repertoire, something like post 1950. I'm like, oh, the Harbison is neat because it's modern, it's kind of progressive, but it kind of has an ear back to the past as well, and it really kind of resonated with me. So I first started really working on that for preparation for that particular audition, and it's just kind of stuck with me because there are certain solo cello works 20th century that are really interesting because they are very progressive and they sound nothing like Bach. But this one's, I think, also interesting because it does, but he still maintains his kind of own harmonic and creative voice while still hearkening back to where it all started with Bach's suites.
Well, and I also love the fact that despite the fact that he has a slightly out there harmonic world, he's very much steeped in the world of tonal harmony.
Oh yeah.
You have arpeggios, you have a tonal center, and
yes.
It's always nice to have a piece that the listener can feel grounded at times, as well as going far afield.
Right.
And it's the same thing actually with that incredible Kodaly solo piece. It's a very intense piece, and I'd recommend all of the attendees of this webinar to listen to this wonderful work. But there too, it's a very grounded piece. It's
yes. I mean that one for me, I did have a chance to play that, and that's for me the beauty of that piece, especially in the slow movement, is that it is incredibly rhapsodic. It's just like these long flowing ideas. I mean, it's like you feel like you're just in this sound world that he just creates. It's just this massive world. And also he and Bartok, which was so great, was they were just so accurate and real to all of the folk music that they were trying to recreate, going out into the fields with wax cylinder to record the people playing so that the sounds, they could recreate them on our traditional instruments as close as possible. And there's just so much character and so much color that we've never seen before. So yeah, I second that. Highly recommend checking that one out.
If you could choose one composer from all time to have written a piece for solo cello, who would it be?
That's a really great question. Would this pertain to someone that didn't already do so?
I would assume so, yeah.
Okay, because before I would say, oh, Dionysius Bach wrote one. You already did it. Wow.
Sweet.
Man, thinking of, the composers and what would really work well with the cello. In a way, solo piece, I don't know, something other than Bach that I'm always drawn to, another composer I always feel such a personal connection to would be Brahms. I'd be really curious to know what Brahms would have done for any sort of strictly solo string writing, not sonata or concerto. So it would have been interesting if people had been writing more for solo string instruments at that time, what he would have done with voicing or with color or anything like that.
I think it's a great answer. I mean, I think in any favorite or wish, Brahms is right there. I mean,
Yes.
and he wrote such beautiful music for cello in all of his chamber
Yes.
music, his cello sonatas, of course, and the double concerto.
Yes.
So as I said earlier, today is our special family edition of the Lake Placid Sinfonietta Happy Hour. I featured my son Zev before playing four hands with me, but we have a special treat as well from the Brin family, don't we?
Yes, I will see. I'll see if we can gather the artist from upstairs. 1 second.
Well, while we're waiting for Jonathan to return, if anyone has any questions, now is the time to ask in the question and answers, because we'll probably have just a few minutes once we're done with this last musical selection. And I also want to give my word of thanks to all of you for joining us today. But who do we have here? I know this face. Where'd you go? Hey, remember me?
Yes.
Well, it's great to see you again, Annabelle. Do you want to introduce your daughter, Jonathan?
Yes, this is our daughter Annabelle. She's been working on really hard on the cello for quite some time now. Did you want to do some of the questions and answers, or?
I think that we're okay. Let's just go forward with the music.
Okay, great. So do you want to tell them what we're going to play, or do you want me to tell them? I can tell. Okay, yeah. So we are going to be playing Long, Long Ago. Ready?
Brava, brava, brava. Can you take a bow? Oh, that was, I have to say, we've had beautiful playing by your dad. And that was just the perfect way to bring our musical selections to a close. Thank you so much for sharing your music with us.
You're welcome.
How long have you been playing cello, Annabelle?
2 years now.
About 2 years.
Well, you've learned a lot already. You sound really terrific. I'm hoping very soon you'll be playing with us in the Sinfonietta. Would you like that?
Yes.
Do you have anything that you want to say to the people up in Lake Placid? Do you miss seeing them?
No.
No, of course you do. Do you miss seeing them?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to see you, and thank you again so much for joining us. That was a very beautiful thing you just played. Thanks.
Have a quick hi from everybody.
Oh my goodness. Hey, how are y'all doing? So you want to introduce everybody?
Sure.
This is Oliver.
Yep.
He's the new kid.
Hello, Oliver.
And then we have Elliot.
I remember Elliot. How are you?
He's
Oh,
so
yeah.
shy.
Yeah, I remember him being shy until he's not shy anymore.
Yes.
And then we have Amanda, who's just off the screen.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good. We miss you all.
Well, it's wonderful to see you, and it's
Thank
wonderful to see your beautiful family too.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So one last question, and actually I'm glad, Amanda, you're here because there's a question here from Pat Eldridge. She wants to know if the two of you are doing any virtual teaching this summer, and if so, how is that working?
We are. We started going online in March with both the college that we teach at and then all of our private students, and we're continuing through the summer. And it's actually going really well. Surprisingly, and it's one of the things I've noticed in some ways, because you always try to, I'm one that always likes to try to find the positive in things, and I have found with some of these students, like I have a decent number of younger students, they're learning how to tune their instruments because I'm not there to tune their fine tuners, and so in certain ways they're growing in ways that they wouldn't have if they were just coming every week. So we're finding, I would say, some of those advantages like that.
You know, that's fascinating. It's things that you just don't think about, but that is
Right.
a wonderful thing that comes along with all of this.
Right. And even a small thing like they're writing in their own music now. It's not just us writing everything in. And I think that's different when they're actually making notes for themselves.
Yep.
I've noticed that being different too.
I agree. Well, anyway, so it's time to bring this to a close. It's wonderful to see you, Amanda.
Nice to see
Jonathan,
you.
thank you so much for spending this hour with us.
Thank you.
Annabelle, once again, thank you for playing. And Elliot and Oliver, great to see you both. And to all of you attendees.
Oh, yes, sorry. Elliot wanted to say he turned the page in his violin book.
Oh, fantastic. Keep up the good work. And hopefully we'll see you very soon next summer.
I'm starting my bow.
To all of the attendees, we'll be doing this every week on Sunday evenings at 5 o'clock. So please do join us next week. We'll have information out soon on our Facebook page. And thank you so much. Please let us know if you have any feedback. If there's anything that you would like to let us know about your experience with these, because we want to keep improving them and we want to give you what you want. But for now, thank you so much, and see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.